Hello guys, today I'm going to present you Chinese approach crisis communication in COVID-19 case study, made by me, Gafurov Aleksandr. China was the first country to face the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Owing to the prompt and decisive action of the authorities and the consolidation of society, the country has passed and the peak of infection and economic activity is gradually recovering. The case study shows how COVID-19 affects key factors of life, production and communication. So here you can see the data of infected people in China and all over the world, vaccinated people and loss of money in China and all over the world to the 2020. Virtually no country on the planet is exempt from COVID-19 impact, with some catastrophically hit. As the first major epicenter of the virus, China has been criticized by some parts of the international community for its handling of the crisis. There has been considerable controversies concerning transparency and the early response to the epidemic. Despite the hostile sentiments towards the country that are still prevalent in many parts of the world, it's clear, however, that China has managed to contain this unprecedented public health crisis chiefly since the lockdown of Wuhan. Three approaches in crisis: tweaking the institutions, command chain, and decision making. Despite its large territory and population, China is an unitary state with highly fluid central-local relations. Strategic decisions are made by political principles at the top, but the role of local agents is not to merely execute policies. Local policy activism and experimentation are not only allowed but also largely encouraged so long as they are apolitical and able to generate innovative solutions for policy problems. In fact, various waves of fiscal decentralization since the 1980s have given rise to fiscal federalist structure in this unitary state, whereby local governments have substantive political autonomy in local socio-economic affairs. Given the vast interregional disparities in local circumstances, this this decentralized structure constitutes one of the cornerstones underlying China's economic success in the past 4 decades, as it has powerfully incentivized the local states' enthusiastic pursuit of economic growth. It would be wrong, however, to assume this symptomatic of a weakening of central authority control, because strong party leadership remains the overriding principle of China governments. The Lenin's rule of political command strictly requires unconditional compliance with the party's decisions. Hence, the possible divergence of political pursuits between central principles and local agents tends to be far less significant in China as compared to many other political systems. Consequently, tight political control improved the central authority to steer the behavior of local governments in a top-down manner during emergencies. Steering the bureaucracy, carrots and sticks. Aligning government personnel towards crisis management is crucial for concerted governments as tackling the emergencies. Uncertainties and complexities requires the Zerman's devotion and focus on the part of civil servants, as well as necessary discretion and creative strategies. Many poor outcomes in crisis management are attributable to a varying extent to ineffective mobilization of the bureaucracy. In the Soviet nomenclatura style system, senior cadres are selected and appointed by the party rather than through competitive elections. Many poor outcomes of crisis management are attributable to a varying extent to an effective mobilization of bureaucracy. In the Soviet nomenclatura style system, senior cadres are selected and appointed by the party rather than through competitive elections. In the absence of the universal electoral link, the cadre's political career is essentially determined by party evaluation of their various merits such as political loyalty, competency, and track record. This nomenclatura style, albeit instrumental to economic growth, has been found to offer less incentive for local cadres to promote social welfare, investment of environmental protection. Furthermore, as spring social unrest is held as another strategic mandate assigned by the central state to the local agents. Local cadres face pressure to prevent possible local incidents from escalating to the national spotlight. Such bureaucratic consideration, compounded by the motive of blame avoidance, can in fact provide incentives for some cadres to cover up local incidents. Yet China's public personnel management system also manifests extraordinary adaptability amidst crisis. Several major mechanisms allow to the party state to quickly reorient cadres towards the agency perceived central tasks. Mobilizing resources. Authoritarian states are usually found to be in an advantageous position in mobilizing resources during crisis. The China state, in particular, has shown impressive mobilization capacity in disaster relief and post-disaster reconstruction. Its ability to extract massive human and material resources is largely underpinned by two crucial conditions: the nationwide allocation of resources and the large state-owned enterprise sector. Firstly, strong central authoritarian rule enables the Chinese government to marshal vast resources from both civilian and military subordinates, usually in non-negotiable terms due to the political obligations of the subordinates to the state. The People's Liberation Army, in particular, plays a pivotal role in pandemic control and disaster relief. In the COVID-19 battle, about 4,000 military health workers accompanied by abundant equipment and supplies were sent to Wuhan by the PLA. One of the two newly established field hospitals treating the most severe cases was taken over by military medical teams. Secondly, while governments of some countries have been struggling with material resources in the COVID-19 battle, the Chinese government is in a much more favorable position because the huge state-owned enterprise sector provides a solid economic foundation for material mobilization. Unlike their private peers in the market economy, SOEs in China are subject to relatively soft budget constraints. Fulfilling political mandates is no less important than market performance. Dominating the strategic industries, the large SOS can organize massive supplies to the anti-pandemic battle, irrespective of cost. For example, two specialized field hospitals mentioned above were built by state-owned construction companies with starting speed less than 2 weeks. So here you can see the such kind of map, step by step, what COVID-19 had done with us. First report, first deaths, human to human, transmission confirmed, etc. Mobilization in the communities. How did mobilization take place in the communities? The highly contagious nature of the COVID-19 requires extremely rigid social distancing and sometimes community confinement, the absence of which has led the exponential community spread in many countries around the world. The challenges of enforcing social distancing in a community confined and diverse contingent of countries' special culture and social political background. In some countries, the difficulties mainly stem from rebellion, values, and strong civil society resistance, whereas in other countries, weak administrative capacity impedes the state from cursing enforcement in community and individual households. In accordance with the relevant laws and regulations, the government hereby announced community confined measures as follows. Strictest lockdown of neighborhoods and other residence areas must be enforced. No vehicles are permitted to enter or exit. Exemptions are granted to official vehicles, ambulances, police vehicles, fire engines, the other with designed purposes. Second, full close management mode is adopted in all residential buildings. Entry and exit are strictly prohibited. Exemptions are granted to health workers, delivery staff of medical supplies, governmental persons, and other staff responsible for essential services. Third, strictest wartime management is adopted in all communities. Residents must enter and exit with a designated pass. One member per household is permitted to go grocery shopping every 3 days. Temperature check is mandatory. Essential supplies, including medicines for vulnerable households with special needs, are to be delivered to doorstep by community staff. First, entrances of all buildings and other residential areas are kept by dedicated security guards on a 24 hours basis. No exit is allowed without permissible reasons specified above. Fifth, all residents under medical observations must not leave home with all essential supplies guaranteed by the authorities. Close contact with household members must be avoided. 6. Any attempt of exiting without permission will be penalized in accordance with relevant laws and regulations. Community mobilization against pandemic. Community mobilization against the pandemic has been underpinned by a sweeping war narrative. Key terms often used by the government include containable campaign, total war, battle of annihilation, and people's war. The anti-pandemic campaign was ultimately framed as a battle between the virus and mankind, while similar narratives are also found in the speeches of political leaders and official documents of the other countries. Such extension use in China is remarkable, as a cultural legacy of the communist armed struggle in the revolutionary era. War narratives are widely used in many civilian affairs in China, especially disaster relief and crisis management, conveying a strong sense of urgency. The war narrative also serves as emotional mobilization, appealing to citizens for behavioral compliance with coercive measures. In practice, the narrative is not merely used as social rhetoric or metaphor by political leaders, but practically penetrated into the entire society. Central mechanisms in the Chinese approach. There are two central mechanisms in the Chinese approach to community mobilization. First, during the lockdown of Wuhan, all local neighborhoods within the city were also locked down. The rest of Hubei province soon followed suit. Without doubt, such a province-wide community confinement involving tens of millions of residents required immense resources, particularly manpower. The Chinese government responded to this critical shortage of manpower with a mass send-down of CPC members as grassroots volunteer enforced. In Hubei alone, 500,000 party members were sent down. Portrayed in communist ideology as pioneers of society, party members were expected to stand at the forefront of the battle. These unpaid but disciplined CPC members became the key workforce in community mobilization against COVID-19. Second, the Chinese government utilized the urban grid system extensively. The enforced community confirmed. The grid management system has mushroomed in China in recent years, touted as a social administration innovation. Since studying urban administrative boundaries, the system recognizes urban neighborhoods in a number of grid cells, each of which is assigned with dedicated grid controllers. For example, Wuhan, as a major metropolis with a population of 15 million, is divided into approximately 10,000 grid cells. Grid controllers are responsible for a wide range of community affairs, including security and social services. Launched in many Chinese cities prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, the grid management system turned out to be an ideal tool for the government's enforcement measures to penetrate to the grassroots level. Assisted by the sent-down party members, grid controllers were under strict order to monitor all residents and report anything unusual. Some residential blocks were sealed off while all residents had to enter or leave via a single gate guarded by grid controllers on 24/7 basis. Many research reports as well as anecdotal materials suggest an extremely heavy-handed enforcement of community lockdown and social distancing, not only in Wuhan but also in many other parts of China. This study had sought to encapsulate the distinctive features of the Chinese response to the COVID-19 pandemic through the lens of crisis governance. I have illustrated how the Chinese government organized the command structures, treated the bureaucracy, mobilized resources, and carried out community enforcement in response to the outbreak. Clearly, many aspects of crisis government style are uniquely Chinese, embedded in the country's authoritarian system and socio-economic context. Chinese approach may appear to the international community as largely totalitarian and old-fashioned. One may of course argue that the fatal gravity of the COVID-19 threat and its rate of contagion critically require a more aggressive and decisive top-down response. However, China's approach to the two public health mega crises, albeit almost 2 decades apart, may be crystallized in two defining characteristics: institutional level, strategic level, operational level. First, at the institutional level, the painstaking building of institutional capacity for crisis management in the aftermath of CARS outbreak unfortunately failed to prevent the epidemic from escalation at the initial stage. Second, at the strategic level, the whole of government approach, strengthened by the wartime narrative, is observed in Chinese response to both CRSC and COVID-19, and appears to be a hallmark of its unique style of crisis governance. Third, at the operational level, the Chinese state appears to own an even larger arsenal to fight a pandemic compared to 17 years ago. Various policy instruments in its toolkit allowed the state to deploy manpower, material resources, sense-making, and even moral capital in forceful top-down manner, irrespective of course. So guys, thank you for attention.